Hey, Fire Team members. I'm going to talk a little bit about today the things I learned at the Metabolic Health Summit. I'll tell you what that means in a second, but I did take, probably 20, so from here to here, that many notes, so that's a lot. I'm not going to go through everything, obviously, because we'll be here for a couple hours, but I just wanted to cover just kind of some highlights, some of the things that I learned, some of the really interesting and astounding statistics. Also, the latest research is ever changing in nutrition and metabolic health. So this conference is amazing, and I've been to it 3 years in a row now. And it's really the only conference that I go to now because it really is that valuable. I think, bar none, like minute by minute, it's time well spent. It's super technical. It's basically almost all medical providers and researchers. All of these presentations are very science focused. It's basically the latest and greatest on the newest research in nutrition and health and metabolic therapies. So what does that mean? That means that there are researchers out there doing research, controlled, randomized controlled trials. There were some, case studies, presentations, but basically focusing on how nutrition can help heal various chronic health conditions, prevent various chronic health conditions, and even reverse various chronic health conditions. Everything basically is covered at this conference. So there's research being presented on not only obesity and weight loss, of course, but heart health, mental health, autoimmune disease, autism, dementia, and Alzheimer's, lots and lots on psychiatric and mental health. This year, epilepsy, of course, which has been, the low-carb diets and have been used to treat those for a very long time. Type 2 diabetes, same thing. So the list goes on and on with all the chronic medical conditions that nutrition can enhance, reverse, prevent, and even treat. So, and these are, highly esteemed researchers, very the names of the colleges that these people went to or work for or at, Cambridge, Harvard, USC, Stanford, Ivy League schools. These are all like highly respected researchers in their fields, doing some amazing things in the fields of metabolic science, and sharing their data and information with the public at this conference. So I just gobble it all up. I am so into the science. It is pretty cerebral, it is pretty advanced, so kind of a layman walking in, it probably isn't the best conference to go to if you don't know the ATP and Krebs cycle, and you're not familiar with kind of basic metabolic biology. You would want to go to like a maybe a different conference that's a little bit more layman, but I'm going to kind of give you the Cliff's Notes in layman terms of what this is all about. And thank you for joining me, whoever that is, if you have any comments or questions about this. But I'm just going to zoom right through just some highlights that I got from the conference that you can apply to your life, or maybe may trigger some questions or things you may want to think about. But it really is all about, bottom line is, nutrition is medicine. And if you are deluded enough to believe that, pills and procedures are going to fix your problems, you're very wrong. It's really just cover-ups, and 99% of medication doesn't actually treat the condition. It just covers up the symptoms. So we have to get the root of the cause. And more now, they are finding out that basically almost every condition is a metabolic condition. And even more so, added to that, they had maybe 3 or 4 presentations specifically about the gut microbiome and the link between these conditions and the chronic health conditions in your gut microbiome. So there was some really good information about that. And this is just emerging, an emerging area of health because it's so new. So I think personally for me, I mean, I always learn something at these conferences, but for me specifically, because there finally was, and there hasn't been in the past, so much focus and information and data now on the gut microbiome, and they're making just such great headway in the research. There's some pretty compelling and interesting things about the link between your health, everything, mental health, your weight, your chronic conditions, and whether it be, that you suffer from specific things like cancer or Alzheimer's, or even just general health and metabolic energy and feeling your best. Your gut has a big part to play in this, if not a primary role. So lots of focus on that. So I just wanted to maybe cover some highlights and just give you some information to think about. So first was Dr. Rhonda Patrick. So many of you have probably seen her. She's a very prominent celebrity doctor. She has been on lots of different shows and TV, and most notably she's on the Joe Rogan podcast a lot, so a lot of people know her from that, and she's kind of his go-to when it comes to medical discussions about things. So she was kind of the keynote speaker on the very first day of the conference, and she talked about intestinal permeability. So she talked about gut health. And she admits to herself that she's kind of now just getting into really learning about this research. But there's this thing called LPS. LPS is lipopolysaccharides. So lipopolysaccharides are kind of part of the reason why we have leaky gut syndrome. So if you suffer from pretty much any condition, an autoimmune condition, could cause chronic inflammation, you probably have lipopolysaccharides floating around in your body, and it's because you have an unhealthy gut. And basically what she covered was that there are a lot of links between a high level of blood lipopolysaccharides. So these are not supposed to be found in the blood, but they are being found in the blood circulating in people with specific chronic health conditions. So this is a link, right? So these people who have these diagnoses, these issues, these medical conditions are found with lipopolysaccharides floating around in their blood. And that's, for a healthy person, a healthy individual, you should find none, if not very little, in the blood. So this is a very important link. So again, there's nothing been proven, but it is definitely correlation. So you need to be thinking about gut health and your gut permeability. So it's important to know that, if you're eating in a certain way and certain things, open up the tight glial cells so your gut actually is not sealed. If you didn't know that, your gut is not sealed. You have these tiny little, basically they're fit together like this, and then they can open with inflammation or certain triggers to let things in and out of the gut, right? So, that's how nutrients get through. That's how you absorb nutrients, through your intestinal lining, right? So they open up these what they're called tight junctions, and they let nutrients through. But unfortunately, bad things get through those parts as well, and they're not supposed to. So people with atherosclerosis, so that's kind of a precursor to a potential, definitely a higher risk for heart disease, heart attack, strokes, have higher LPS floating around in their blood system. So again, you have to think about, it's not causation, but it's definitely correlation. So getting to the root cause, maybe I need to be working on my gut health, right? People who with dementia have higher levels of LPS in their blood, okay? So again, talking about correlation, so they're just now finding out these things about people with certain chronic health conditions. And then they've found that actually when they inject people, so in these research events that they do, they inject people with polylipoproteins. They see an increase in pro-inflammatory cytokines, and it specifically affects tryptophan. So tryptophan is involved in the creation. You cannot create serotonin without tryptophan, okay? So if you suffer from anxiety or depression or PTSD, you have been seeing these people with these conditions have been seeing that they have higher levels of LPS in circulating in their blood. Again, so you should be aware that there are kind of cascading issues that have to do with poor gut health. So people are so worried about heart health and eating whole grains and eating my fruits and vegetables and exercising and drinking my water, but nobody ever talks about gut health. Other than, I take a probiotic. That is not gut health. Just because you take a probiotic doesn't mean you have a healthy gut. Because the issue is, even if you're taking a probiotic, if you are still consuming things that are creating those tight junctions to open and to let these foreign bodies that shouldn't be floating around in your blood system, it doesn't matter how many probiotics you take, because those are two different processes. Probiotics create, good bacteria, which is great. And good bacteria does help you keep those tight junctions closed. But that's not the only thing you need to be doing. So there's so many things that you have to do for gut health. We did a whole chapter on that in our book club with our last book club. We did an entire section on gut health and gave a ton of information about certain things that you should be doing to improve your gut health. So I'm not going to cover all those things because we've done that before. You can look back and just search gut health on the Fireteam Whiskey members website right here where you're at, and you can pull up that that video and watch that, because we've definitely talked about that at length. All right, so gut permeability. What increases gut permeability? Stress. So that's the number one thing. An obesogenic diet. So an obesogenic diet would be high processed foods, high sugars, high combination of high fat, high sugars. A majority of foods that have been processed highly and or fried and with chemicals and hydronic acids or oils. Obesity, weight loss, and binge drinking. Even moderate alcohol consumption has been linked to poor gut permeability. So those are some specific behaviors that that pretty much guarantee that you have poor gut permeability. So those are some things that actually can be controlled, of course. All right. Okay. Oh, and omega-3s. That's kind of one of my takeaways of this conference that I attended was omega-3s are definitely something that we don't talk enough about in nutrition, and they seem to be pretty darn important. I mean, every nutrient is important, obviously, but we seem to have a kind of chronic omega-3 deficiency across the board with most humans, and I can certainly say I probably do too, because I don't consume a lot of fish. So I do take spirulina and algae. So those are kind of actually the precursors to omega-3s. So the fish consume algae and spirulina, so that is a part of the omega-3s that you get with consuming fish. So that's definitely been linked to gut permeability. So, and it's directly correlated. So what I mean by that is the more omega-3s you consume, the better gut health you have. And the less omega-3s you consume, the poorer gut health you have. So there is a direct correlation between these two things. So definitely want to keep looking at what specifically about omega-3 has an impact on those tight junctions in the gut lining. But there is a direct correlation. So there are three sources of or three kinds of the components of omega-3 fatty acids. So omega-3, there's 3 parts of it, right? The 3 fatty acids. So you have ALA, EPA, DHA, and I actually used to supplement with like fish oil supplements, and that might be a great way to just easily get more omega-3s in your diet. Walnuts and seeds specifically are pretty good, pretty high doses of ALA, so that's a good natural source. And EPA and DHA, basically the only ways you can get them is through seafood. So this is a major problem, obviously, for vegetarians and vegans or people who just don't consume seafood, because these are essential fatty acids and we're not getting them, and they seem to be directly correlated with a good gut health. So definitely want to I've actually been looking now, like, okay, how can I get more omega-3s? I actually went out to dinner last night and ordered fish, so I'm going to be really trying to up my omega-3s to improve my gut health, of course. And then a high omega-3 index is associated with a 90% reduced risk of sudden cardiac death and, bonus, a 5-year higher life expectancy. So that's a direct link as well for omega-3s. So, and then a low omega-3 index is you have the same life expectancy as a smoker. That's a pretty astounding correlation right there. So even if you are not a smoker, but you have poor and low omega-3s, then you have the same life expectancy as a smoker. So this is an extremely important nutrient that we need to be focusing on. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about is, I'm going to skip this one. There's a lot of talk about brain health, specifically Alzheimer's, dementia. Very, very interesting stuff with that. Definitely the dietary approach of increasing healthy fats is something that has been shown already in research for over decades to improve and even slow the progress of dementia and Alzheimer's. It's definitely not a cure, but it's one of those things that improves the insulin resistance of the brain and provides better energy contacts through the energy source of BHB, which is beta hydroxybutyrate. Most people don't know that even though your brain is very glucose heavy as far as energy is concerned, when you have a insulin resistant brain, which is what is dementia and Alzheimer's, is basically it's basically type 3 diabetes is what they're calling it. So it's an insulin resistant brain. And of course you can't, there's a different kind of insulin, or it uses it in a different way in the brain. So you can't put an insulin pump on somebody's skull and just, do what they do for the body. It doesn't work that way. So a way to kind of slow and mitigate the effects and maybe even reverse some of the progression of these diseases is definitely going on a very, very low carb, very high fat diet, and forces the brain to switch out of using sugar, which you can't anymore because it's insulin resistant, to beta hydroxybutyrate, which is the forms of fats. Basically, that's the form of energy of fat. So our body has 2 sources of energy: glucose or fat. So by the form of BHB. So our bodies can do either or, and unfortunately for most of people's lives, they're only doing the glucose. So they're causing all this damage and insulin resistance, and the brain and the body never actually has an opportunity to use fats as fuel, or hardly ever does. So this is what they're doing with Alzheimer's and dementia patients, and really having a lot of successes and slowing down the progression of the disease. But it's definitely not a cure. But the argument is, if we can take care of these inflammatory things and not have that insulin resistance build up over time and then eventually result in type 3 diabetes, which is dementia and Alzheimer's, would we even be able to prevent this disease and completely get rid of it altogether in our society? that's the argument in the question is this maybe even a necessary disease? Maybe this is like obesity, where it can actually not even exist in type 2 diabetes. So we know that these are lifestyle related diseases and can completely 100% be prevented. But unfortunately, because of the disease process, you get to a certain point, enough damage has been done, it's pretty hard to reverse it at that point, and other systems are being cascaded and affected. So, just like you see in type 2 diabetes, nobody dies of almost no one dies of type 2 diabetes, which is, maybe like a diabetic coma. What type 2 diabetics die of is heart disease and cancer and renal failure, right? So, they're not dying of type 2 diabetes hardly ever. It's the cascading effects of the damage caused by that specific chronic health condition. So that's the argument. Is the same. It's kind of the same thing as dementia and Alzheimer's. So it's that cascading effect of that breakdown of the individual disease causing these kind of irreversible damage of the body. Obesity is quickly overtaking tobacco as the leading preventable cause of cancer, which is very, very sad. And 40% of cancers are attributed to obesity. Insulin and cancer are directly correlated, and insulin is much higher in people who are obese, even if they're insulin resistant. So, people have this misunderstanding of type 2 diabetics that and I hear this all the time from type 2 diabetics, and it drives me insane because I just want to punch these doctors in the face. Because I don't know if they don't even understand the disease, or if they just are trying to dumb it down so much that they're not even explaining it right to their patients, which is kind of a violation of the very first premise of being a medical provider, is do no harm. You need to describe exactly what the disease process is to your patients. We have a duty to do that. So I even did that with my 10-year-old, 11-year-old, and 12-year-old clients when I worked in the prison system. They all knew their diagnosis, they all understood their disease, and they all could tell me what it is in their own kind of 12-year-old terms, right? So that is a primary issue I have with kind of the medical field, is that's not really being done a lot, especially with type 2 diabetics, as they're being told that they're not creating insulin anymore. That is absolutely a lie. That is not true. That's not what's going on. They actually have more insulin in their bodies than a normal weight person. So they need to understand what insulin resistance is and what's going on in their body and what's causing that. So, and just interesting things with the correlation between, of course, cancer and insulin and those disease processes going on. They had 2 presentations on exercise and exercise being used in oncology, which was really, really interesting. And then one of the last presentations I'm going to skip to, I was so excited about, because guess what? You're going to find out that if you have higher muscle mass, you actually have a higher intelligence score. We're going to get that in a minute. So exercise oncology, really interesting stuff. A lot of big oncology clinics are starting to do this. They are one of the biggest risks to a cancer patient is what's called sarcopenia, and this is the lack of muscle mass and reduction in bone mass in patients who have cancer, because they tend to get in a negative caloric state because of chemotherapy and the treatments, and lose a lot of body density, and this actually puts you at risk to all sorts of problems, but definitely your autoimmune kinds of reactions. Plus, on top of that, you're doing chemo, and that kills your immune system. So, a majority of cancer patients don't actually die of cancer. They die of other, even viral diseases or infections that they get because they don't have an immune system anymore to fight this off. So this is a big issue. So when you strip somebody's, bone density and muscle mass off, you are basically kind of knocking down their immune system. And they're building blocks to create a healthy immune system after you're done with chemo, after the chemo kind of knocks down your immune system. So they finally realized that it's really important to not only, get them on a good healthy nutritional plan, giving them those nutritional blocks to put back on that body mass that they need, but also to improve their bone density and improve their muscle mass and get that up as soon as possible. So they're actually setting up these gyms and these oncology wards to get cancer patients, like basically straight from the chemo chair into the gym and get them to start putting back on that muscle mass and that body and that bone density, and actually doing the things that they need to do that. Because unfortunately, they with people who go through chemo and cancer, they have less energy, and they feel like frail, or they feel like they can't really push themselves hard enough, and they're proving in these oncology gyms that they can, and they're doing like box jumps and burpees and like heavy lifting and snatch deadlifts, and like he had videos and pictures of this, and this was just so amazing, seeing these cancer patients like doing these extreme workouts. But they need that because it's going to put the muscle mass and bone density on faster, and you're going to get more. So they're going to get the benefits of that more quickly, than just doing a silly physical therapy where you're just doing these little pedal bikes and you're barely moving your body, or doing like isolated exercises where you're doing just like a leg extension where it's just isolating that one part. You're not moving your whole body. You're not getting the benefits of the impacts and the the full body weight and the movement and the functional movement. So really neat stuff. And the interesting thing about it, of course, is the links between cancer and obesity. We just talked about that. And so that helps with those things too. Obviously, we want cancer patients to have a healthy body fat, and not just because they went through chemo and got cancer. That's like pretty damn dumb, right? We got to look at this in a more preventive way, even if it's maybe too late and they were obese and they did get cancer. But we have an opportunity to teach them new skills and get them on a different path after cancer treatment. So, they're taking that kind of advantage of that, and that's the additional benefits of this kinds of thing. And this was a crazy statistic. And I believe it. I mean, it's just, unfortunate, but, most breast cancer patients don't die of breast cancer. They don't. They die of obesity-related chronic illnesses. So they're not dying of cancer. Again, so this is the full circle thing of, we have to look at prevention and, disease mitigation and reversal, rather than just focusing on disease treatment, right? So this is a part of that holistic approach. So, breast cancer patients are, more likely to be obese and have an unhealthy body composition, and to die of type 2 diabetes related illnesses rather than actual cancer. So, but, we're all about the pink ribbon and the prevention of cancer, and it's so much focus on the cancer. And actually we need to be focusing on diabetes, right? Because this is what is killing breast cancer patients, not cancer. So, we've kind of come full circle of, back in the day, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s even, where, women with breast cancer was basically a death sentence. It's not like that anymore. More and more people are surviving from these cancers that used to be a death sentence, not just like maybe as recent as 3 or 4 decades ago. So now we're talking about the other diseases that are going to kill these cancer patients, and how we're kind of ignoring that because we're still so focused on the cancers, right? But the cancers aren't killing them. So that needs to be a focus of, our medical approach. And certainly it's always been my focus, but no, I don't care what damn disease you have. We can metabolically help you, prevent you, and or reverse some of those things. And then jumping to the last presentation. So this will be the last one I cover that I was just so giddy about. I want to give you his name, and I'll give you the quote. Okay, so this is Dr. Tommy Wood, and so he started his presentation with a quote, and I quoted it on our social media as well. He said, "Brains are important, but biceps are importanter. I love that. I thought it was so clever. And the title of his presentation, his scientific presentation, was More Bigger, More Brainier, Muscle, Metabolic Health, and Cognition. So I was instantly very excited to hear him present and on what his research has been showing. And what's really interesting is that there is a direct correlation between and it's U curve. So if you're aware of a U curve or a bell curve, either way you can look at it. So the less muscle mass you have, you actually is directly correlated with a lower cognitive intelligence score. And then, so there's this U curve of, okay, so you get more muscle mass and your intelligence, cognitive scores go up, right? And then there is a drop off. So you get to a certain point of lean body muscle mass and general muscle mass, and your intelligence scores actually go down. So, basically the tinier you are, the less body mass you have, the less of your cognitive intelligence scores. And then if you go to kind of a good healthy balance, then you higher. And then when you go over a certain point, when you become obese or overweight, then your cognitive intelligence scores start going out. So this basically would blow people's minds. Like, how is that possible? Your body weight and your body composition should have nothing to do with your brain. Well, it does. They already know that obese people have smaller brains because of the inflammation and the insulin resistance happening and the stripping of the fat cells. They show that obese people actually have these compressed brains. They may have used to have bigger brains, but they're now being eaten away by the disease process. That's already been proven and shown. So of course that's going to affect your cognition. Your inflammation levels are going to affect your cognition. So there's a lot of things that your insulin resistance in your brain is going to affect your cognition. So yeah, that makes sense to me because I know how the body works. But the general layman, out there who doesn't, they'd be like, well, that's stupid. That doesn't even make sense. That's not possible. Well, yes, it is, because of the way the disease process works with your body composition, right? But I thought it was really interesting as far as like higher muscle mass, a lean body muscle mass. It wasn't just, I'm just of a average weight. It really did have to do with, the correlation had to do with lean body muscle mass. So somebody can be the exact same weight as the next person, but I may have a higher muscle mass and lower body fat than the person of the exact same weight. Does that make sense? So the correlation would be, I would have a higher cognitive intelligence score than a person with the same weight, but also, a lower lean body muscle mass. So, there was tons of data that he presented, lots of different studies that they did. But it's basically just showed over and over again that, this U curve happens no matter what age you are. And you have the benefits of, if you start this process, no matter how old you are, if you start this process and get your lean body muscle mass up and your body fat percentage down, you are at an advantage when it comes to a natural age-related decline in body muscle mass overall. We all experience it no matter what, no matter how healthy or unhealthy you are. At a certain age, like 60, 65 plus, we start to experience a significant decline in body muscle mass overall, right? So even bone density, muscle, everything. Even obese people start to just lose weight naturally at, around that age. So it's just a natural decline in muscle mass, body composition. They've shown though, if you start at a healthier muscle mass and body composition, you have the advantage because you're starting up here. We both have the same decline, but somebody who's not healthy and has an unhealthy body composition, and I have a healthy body composition, we're both going to decline at the age of 65. We're going to start to go down this way. But you see how I have an advantage because my decline isn't as low as the unhealthy decline. So the person here is going to decline even quicker and have, of course, the negative impacts of those things, with the risk of fall, risk of harm. You see a lot of those, older people who, they literally cannot, push themselves back up if they fall down. If they fall down, they're much more prone to fractures. So if you have a higher muscle mass and a healthy body composition, you are less likely to suffer from those injuries, which lead to other, of course, unfortunate chronic health conditions of being limited in your ability to heal at that point, because you are older and you have a limited capacity to heal, all those things. So very compounded, but I just was really fascinated by this presentation. Coordinative exercise has the most cognitive function benefits. So coordinative exercise, so that means full body movement. So not just sitting in a gym doing this or leg extensions. So, if you use those, I'm not a huge fan of gym machines. I just am not, because of that specific issue. It's an isolated movement. It only works that one or two muscle areas, and you're not getting the benefits of a full body coordinative effort, right? So, and the impact. There's a definite benefit of impact movements, jumping, running, walking, jarring, kind of, that snatching, that kind of thing. It helps your bone density, definitely, but those short twitch muscles as well. So it's shown that coordinative exercises are the most, has the most cognitive function benefits. So if you're doing things like high intensity interval or CrossFit or, things where you're moving your entire body and getting that impact, it's correlated with a higher cognitive function. And of course that makes sense, right? Because you are actually working on your coordination, your fast twitch muscles, your reaction time, right? So hand-eye coordination, hand-foot coordination, eye-foot coordination, all the coordinations, and balance, right? So you're getting all those benefits. So try to make a majority of the exercises that you do a coordinative one, instead of just kind of like isolated. I'm just standing here doing a million bicep curls, right? And then education is the single most protective factor of dementia risk. So obviously, if you have graduated from school, you went to college, whatever, it's important to continue to challenge your mind, right? Read, do puzzles, do things that not play like video games. That's not what we're talking about. You have to be learning. You have to learn. So that is directly correlated with dementia risk. So definitely be working your mind as well as your body with a coordinated effort. So you got to exercise both, right? And I love that he kind of talked about doing a prescription. So a prescription for all people in medicine, like as he's a doctor, to prescribe an anti-cognitive decline behavior type of prescription, basically. And his prescription basically is lift weights and 2 coordinated exercises, at least 4 to 10 sets a week, 1 to 3 sessions a week. Get adequate protein. You need the building blocks, right? People forget about this. Yeah, you can lift all the weights in the world and exercise as much, but if you're not giving the building blocks to create new muscle mass, then you're not going to be able to put on muscle mass. You have to eat enough protein, and a majority of people are protein deficient. And even people who are athletes and think they're getting enough, they probably aren't. So adequate protein would be, for athletes, for people who are active, 1.6 to 2.2 grams per pound of body weight. I could barely get, especially my female clients, to do 1, per pound of body weight. We struggle to do that. So take a look at your macros, track your macros, and see where you're at, and get a picture and go, I could probably increase my protein, because most likely you can. Of course, greater cognitive demand. So, learning, taking some courses, going to the Metabolic Health Summit, learning for a weekend, doing coordinative skills, kinds of exercises. And, so that was it. That was the prescription. So I was very, very excited to hear that. So good. Lean muscle mass means you more smarter. So so that's it. I have obviously, hundreds of notes here from the Metabolic Health Summit, but I just wanted to share a little bit of snapshots and what my brain has been thinking about since then. And of course, we'll keep sharing some of that stuff with you over time. But I wanted to remind you that we do have our Fire Team Whiskey Book Club, speaking of learning and needing to learn, starting next week for a coaching call. So we will be diving into chapter 1 of Sleep Smarter by Sean Stevenson. If you haven't grabbed your book, you can do that. You can get it on Kindle or audiobook or however you want to read it or listen to it. And join us each week, because that's been a really fun a thing that we've done in the past. Is we do a lot of education, really focus down on how you can apply these things that we're learning about in your own life. And sleep, I mean, that's huge. It's directly linked to, lots of chronic health conditions. So we're going to be talking all about that. And so come on back next week this time, same time, and make sure you get your book and join us. And even if you're not going to read the book, join in and just listen, and we'll give you the highlights. All right, guys, have a great week.